The other day, I was walking back from the grocery store, and as I was walking, I found this, a Pokémon card from the Pokémon trading card game. Now, typically, it's not in my nature to pick up random things off the ground, but when I saw the Pokémon card, I thought of videos like this.
It's gonna be a limited 10, guys. Is there a limit?
These are scalpers. These are not parents that need to buy 7 booster packs of Pokemon cards for their desperate children due to the high demand for these Pokemon cards and the actions of these scalpers. Pokemon cards are surprisingly valuable at times right now. Now, if you're not familiar with what a scalper is, it's a pretty straightforward economic concept. Scalpers are people that buy products in excess of what they need, whether the products already be scarce by existing market pressures or due to artificial scarcity created by scalpers buying up all of the supply. These people then take all the things they've bought and they list them and sell them elsewhere for an extraordinary markup, claiming all the excess profit for themselves and taking available stock from everyone else. Whether or not you've heard of this practice before, I hope it's obvious that the reasonable response to scalping is generally a negative one. Scalpers are very slimy, grimy, terrible people that no one really likes because they drive the prices of products up through their greed. And I guess the good thing here with this video is we're just talking about Pokemon cards, little pieces of paper and cardboard with printing on them. Thankfully, they aren't something that people actually need. I mean, when we look at scalpers and we talk about their practices, whether it be trading cards, whether it be computer components like GPUs or graphics cards, whether it be a certain kind of McDonald's meal, when people scalp things, it makes it harder for every regular person to actually access that resource or product. I mean, imagine if someone applied that same economic process to something more important, like food or water or housing. It would be a tragedy. It'd be one of the greatest moral failings of society a person could possibly imagine. This video is not just about scalping. This video is about the worst kind of scalper, a landlord. You know, there are a lot of things that we are naturally encultured to feel comfortable with, right? Different cultures across the world have different practices for all kinds of things, for hygienics, to how they do transportation, to their governmental structures and economies. I mean, I grew up in a moderately suburban Midwestern city, and I rode the school bus to school, the big yellow school bus. Did you know that in other countries, a lot of people think the big yellow school bus is just a thing they see in movies? But for me, it's completely commonplace. The idea of packing into this giant diesel-powered monster that has to drive for 3.5 hours to complete its loop from the school to the last person that needs picked up back to the school again. That's normal to me. And that's just what I grew up with. And I don't think naturally to question or be critical of that practice. That is what landlords are to most people. I need to make sure I don't reveal the Pokemon card for the entire video, and it's getting very difficult. By the way, if you want to see what actual card this is, I will show you at the end, but you have to watch the whole thing and get subscribed and like the video and share it, please. It could be a shiny. Just for a moment, I want you to forget what you know and forget what you've implicitly learned throughout life regarding the public acceptance of the practice of landlordism. Housing, or real estate, is real, literal estate. It's physical places that a person can own, a person can sell for a price. They have a value. And there is a supply, and there is a limited supply. There are only so many existing homes and apartments and different configurations of domiciles that exist. And landlordism is the process of one person buying more houses than they could ever personally live inside of. And the direct consequence of this practice is people not having access to housing. You know, when Nestle does it with water, we consider it a moral tragedy. The fact that they go around the world buying up resources of water and reselling them for a profit far higher than any normal bottling company actually should, we consider that terrible. Practically dystopian. But when people rent an apartment from a giant corporation that bought the land to then never allow the rentee to ever own the place they live in, we're completely okay with it. When one dude in a city decides to buy up 30 houses as they go on the market following a crash to just then rent it out to people at 50% more expensive than they really would be if the person were just to buy those houses, somehow that's acceptable. It's not. Landlording, this type of scalping, is morally terrible, just as bad as when someone's taking Pokémon cards or graphics cards or any other product you can imagine. That is unethical. Now, at this point, you may be shouting at the screen, what is this kid, some kind of dirty anarchist? And to that, I want to remind you that I shower every day. I am not dirty. Listen, I'm not saying that we should violently execute all landlords. I'm not even saying that I think we should ban the right of a person to rent a property that they used to live in. But that's about where I would cap it. If you are a retired couple who owned your home and are empty nesters, your kids have grown up, you don't need a big house anymore, and you happen to rent that place out to a nice couple in the city while you and your partner are retired and vacationing, you are not the person I am frustrated with. That is a completely fine practice. I mean, one of the common arguments in support of the existence of landlords and renting as a practice is that if people want to pack up and move or have more options and choices, or maybe individuals don't have the capital to buy a house outright, then they can rent. And I understand aspects of that logic, but I want to remind and reinforce this to you. It would be easier to buy a house had landlords not artificially inflated the cost of them by buying all of them up. So regularly, that argument itself falls on its face. But hey, I'm not some sort of authoritarian fascist. I'm not really interested in telling a person what they can and can't do. What I want to persuade you to in this video is that landlords are an immoral existence. They shouldn't happen. Just to drive this home and give you an economic context, I live in the city of Denver. Let's take a look at some apartments and houses that are either owned by corporations or individuals. These are the Commons Park West apartments, which are owned by Holland Residential, a branch of the Holland Partner Group, a company worth over $3 billion. And they are listing a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1-floor apartment that is less than 1,000 square feet for over $2,500 a month. This is Modera at Lohi in Denver, which is managed by Mill Creek Residential, who are worth over $10 billion. A 2-bed, 2-bath, 1,100 square foot apartment here costs over $3,800. And don't even get me started on the second one that's over $5,000 a month. And taking a look at Zillow doesn't help much more. This guy wants $3,500 a month for his 2-bedroom, 1,400 square foot property. This guy wants $3,200 a month for only 1,000 square feet, and he bans you from smoking weed in the house while you're there. And this clown wants about $4,000 for the same size to live in what looks like a treehouse without the tree. And honestly, I wouldn't even be nearly as bothered about these rental agreements and the existence of corporate or private landlords if people were able to rent to own, leasing with an agreement where at some point in time you go on to actually own the property that you've been paying into for so many years. I really don't mind that sort of practice. I find that to be a lot more appropriate. And another counter-argument that I want to acknowledge and address here, something you'll hear more economic-minded people talk about regularly, is this idea that, well, landlords do work. They maintain properties and oftentimes they invest in the building of properties in the first place, and most individuals can't afford to build an apartment complex. Correct. How do individuals afford apartment complexes? It's called a housing co-op, where you put money into getting a property built and you end up owning your property. That's a thing that exists. You don't need some terrible oligarch to build it for you just because they already have the capital. And speaking of me getting a bit belligerent and unkind towards landlords, I want to reframe one of the greatest moral failings of modern society, the idea that homeless people are considered leeches and landlords are not. The fact that people are convinced that impoverished and homeless people are somehow greater drains on the collectives of society than landlords is incredible. It's frankly one of the greatest hallmark achievements of modern capitalism to date. The fact that we've convinced people that people who take almost no energy out of society, people who literally just exist, are somehow a worse drain on society than people who buy up housing to then scalp it for an incredible markup, draining money out of the entire lower and middle classes. You have to understand that especially at the corporate scale, this whole landlordism practice, it is a movement of money from lower classes, centralized and amplified into individuals and small groups, a small group of people with power, which is what we call an oligarch. If you talk to any normal person in the United States who has rented a property, you are likely to know that property managers are to rentals what HR is to your job. They are not your friend. They are not there to help, and regularly and consistently there is data demonstrating that landlords don't even take good care of the properties they buy. So I hope I've impressed this idea upon you. If you can watch a video of complete jack-off idiots lining up at a Pokémon machine to scalp cards and flip them for profit on eBay, then you too should not like the existence of landlords. They are both equally scummy, skeevy, and slimy practices that we should no longer continue to accept. Oh, and if you did make it to the end of this video, you may want to know what this Pokemon card in fact is. It's a Jigglypuff. I think this came from like a McDonald's kids meal or something. Well, hey, if you enjoy my video and enjoy my work, I encourage you to get subscribed, like this video if you liked it, share it with others, leave me comments down below telling me about how your aunt happens to own 3 properties and she's not a bad person. I don't, listen. Hopefully you understand what I've tried to impress upon you here, but go ahead and fight about it in the comments. I will be right there with you, explaining why this practice should no longer be accepted in our society. It is draconian, it is dark ages bullshit. Empty homes while people sleep on the streets. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Goodbye.